Some pain doesn't come with screaming. It comes with a joke said sweetly. In a room full of people who are supposed to love you. One second everyone's laughing, next second you're standing there smiling back while something inside you cracks. Tonight isn't about cheering for anyone's downfall, and it's not about judging a woman. It's about what betrayal does when it shows up dressed in wedding colors. And how truth sometimes has to be spoken where lies feel safest. At my brother's wedding, my wife humiliated me in front of our family. And when it was time for a toast, I stepped closer and whispered what I knew about her pregnancy. Her smile froze. The entire room went dead silent. I'm Lachlan Locke Mercer. And this is how one perfect night turned into the moment my life split in two. My name is Lachlan Locke Mercer. And I'm about to tell you the night my marriage died in front of 300 guests, and why I chose to let it. But before I share my story, I want to know you're here with me. Just say listening in the comments or tell me where you're watching from. I love seeing how far a story can travel when it's finally told out loud. Sometimes even the smallest connection makes the truth easier to carry. Thank you. And if you've ever been betrayed by the person you trusted most, or you're still trying to breathe through something you can't say out loud, please subscribe. It doesn't just help the channel, it reminds me I'm not telling this into the dark. Alright, now let me tell you everything. The room shimmered under soft amber lights, crystal chandeliers casting golden specks across every white linen tablecloth. Laughter rippled through the air, champagne glasses clinked, and somewhere behind me, the band was sliding into the bridge of This Will Be an Everlasting Love. It was the kind of wedding that makes people believe in happily ever afters. And I was standing there in a fitted suit I hadn't had time to tailor properly, gripping a microphone with fingers that refused to stop shaking. They were all looking at me. The big brother. The best man by bloodline, not by title. The one who knew the whole story but hadn't told a soul. Yet. Just minutes before my wife Sienna had leaned in close at the head table, put a hand lightly on my forearm, and let a line drop from her mouth that left my entire chest hollow. Something cruel. Deliberate. Delivered with a smile so radiant it could have passed for kindness. I won't repeat what she said. Not now. What mattered wasn't the words. It was how loud the silence felt afterward. How the laughter around us seemed forced too fast. How even my mother's face stiffened like she wasn't sure whether to smile or apologize for her daughter-in-law. Sienna's dress was flawless. Her hair pinned perfectly, not a strand out of place. She had that look she always wore in public, like she knew cameras were watching and the world needed proof we were perfect. When I lowered the microphone, I walked toward her. Deliberate. Quiet. I bent just low enough so that only she could hear what I whispered. What I knew. Her lips twitched, froze, and her hand went rigid around the cloth napkin on her lap. Her eyes flicked fast, one blink too, and she didn't move again. The room hadn't noticed yet. But I had. So had Graham. My little brother stood a few feet off near the edge of the dance floor, still in his tuxedo. His smile had faltered just a little, like he'd picked up the frequency of something going terribly off script. Harper, his bride, was still laughing at something my mom had said, but her eyes kept drifting to the table, like she could sense something was about to snap. 7 months ago, I thought my life was uncomplicated. We lived in Mount Pleasant in a white southern colonial with a porch that wrapped around like an embrace. It had a swing chair that creaked if you shifted too much, and hydrangeas that Sienna said made the place photogenic. I'd just renewed my contract at the hospital. I'm a pediatric nurse, night shifts mostly, which I don't mind. Kids are resilient, even the sick ones. I liked the quiet hours, the way the world slowed down around 3 a.m., the stillness before sunrise. Our mornings were always soft, coffee on the porch. Sienna wrapped in a blanket, her head on my shoulder, telling me about meetings or client calls or which bridesmaid dresses Harper was about to veto. She worked in event planning. High-end, high-pressure, and always dressed like she was going somewhere more important than where she was. She knew how to make everything seem perfect. She moved through the world like someone auditioning for the role of ideal wife, and I'd always seen that as a strength. I used to tell my friends that she could win an argument without raising her voice or make strangers fall in love with our marriage just by the way she smiled when she said my name. I thought it was a gift. I didn't realize it was a mask. It started slowly, little things. She got busier right around the time the family started planning Graham's wedding. That made sense, didn't it? Everyone was stretched thin, especially Sienna, since she'd volunteered to help Harper navigate vendors and fittings. But then she started changing her phone passcode, said something vague about client privacy. Her phone was always face down. She started going out more brunches, fittings meetings, and when I'd ask where she had answers ready, too ready. I told myself to trust her. I reminded myself she was helping my brother's fiancé. I mean, that's what family does, right? We show up for each other. Looking back now, I can see it. Every warning sign was already there. I just refused to read them. Because I'm not the kind of man who checks his wife's phone. I'm not the guy who makes accusations without proof. I believed that love was about trust, not surveillance. But I was wrong. What I needed wasn't a password or a confession. What I needed was the missing piece, the thing that would force me to stop pretending. If you think a wedding can fall apart because of one whispered sentence, then you haven't heard what I found out. And it didn't start on the wedding day. It started the night I heard the two people I trusted most laughing together on a porch where they never should have been. The engagement party was held in my parents' backyard in Charleston, draped string lights, open bar, someone's Spotify playlist, looping through every love song written after 1985. The scent of fresh-cut lawn and bourbon drifted under the stars. Southern charm at its finest. Diane and Russell Mercer, my parents wouldn't have had it any other way. Sienna, as always, was in the center of it all, making jokes, passing champagne flutes, coordinating people into groups for photos. She slipped so easily into the role of hostess, it was like she'd forgotten this wasn't her event. Harper didn't seem to mind, though. She looked overwhelmed, grateful even. I watched Sienna press her hand to Harper's shoulder like a benediction and say, "Don't worry, I've got it all under control." That was Sienna. Always stepping in, always smoothing over. At first I felt proud. Proud that my wife was the kind of woman who could carry a room, who made things easier for others. Proud that Harper trusted her. That Graham trusted her. But then I heard it. I was walking out with a tray of glasses when I heard laughter, low, too intimate, coming from the wraparound porch. I paused just before turning the corner. Sienna and Graham were standing close, his head dipped slightly toward her. She said something I couldn't catch, but it made him laugh in that way he used to when we were kids, genuine, like he didn't have to hold anything back. It wasn't what they said. It was how they said it. Quiet. Private. As if I was the outsider. When I stepped around the corner, they jerked apart like teenagers caught in the wrong room. Graham coughed and looked away. Sienna smiled too quickly and said, "We were just talking about Harper's vows." I made some joke to keep it light and we all moved on. But something had shifted. Over the next few weeks, I started noticing things I hadn't let myself see before. Sienna began showing up to every wedding planning session, sometimes even when Harper wasn't there. She said she was helping with logistics. Graham started knowing small things about her, what she drank, how she liked her steak, the brand of perfume she always wore. I brushed it off as harmless familiarity. I wanted to. One night, the bridal party met at a restaurant downtown to finalize details. I watched Noah, Graham's best man, tease him about disappearing the night before. "Hope you didn't ditch us for someone interesting," he said. Graham froze for half a second too long. Then he laughed too loud and said something about needing air. Later that evening back home, I emptied Sienna's purse while searching for her keys. A small slip of plastic fell out, a hotel valet ticket for a downtown place we hadn't visited in months. When I asked, she answered smoothly. I met a vendor there. They had a sample suite set up for bridal showers. I nodded, because I wanted to believe her, but I started paying closer attention, to her schedule, to the way she answered questions like she was reciting lines, to the pauses in her stories, too perfectly timed, too sanitized. Then one night, I caught a moment I wasn't meant to. I'd stepped outside to get some air. The party was still glowing inside, people laughing, clinking glasses, music humming under the stars. That's when I heard Graham's voice. He was pacing near the garden phone, pressed tight to his ear. "No, don't tell him yet," he said low, but clear. "Let's wait until the day of." I stood frozen. My first instinct. They were planning something for me. A surprise. A gift. Maybe Sienna and Graham were organizing something behind my back for my birthday or a gesture at the wedding, something good. That's what I told myself. Later, under those same string lights, I stood by the edge of the lawn and looked back at the house, at the people I loved most, framed in golden light, at Sienna laughing in a way I couldn't decode anymore. There are moments in life where you know you're supposed to belong, supposed to feel at home, and yet, you feel like a stranger in your own story. That night was the first time I felt truly out of place. Like I was watching a play where I didn't know my lines anymore. So I made a decision. If there was something they were hiding, I wouldn't ask. I would wait until it came to me on its own. Right then, my phone buzzed. It was a text from Sienna. "Hey love, come inside. Time for a family photo." And I walked back into that house, back into that perfect frame, still smiling, still pretending I didn't know the picture had already been staged. The smell of antiseptic and the steady beep of monitors had always grounded me. But that morning, even the clean, predictable rhythms of the pediatric ward couldn't settle the static in my chest. I had worked 3 nights in a row and was back again for a cover shift. I told myself it was just fatigue. I'd been off lately, distant, distracted. Avery Cho had noticed. "You're different," she said as she passed me a chart. "Not bad different. Just quiet." I nodded, said I was tired. That was true, but not the whole truth. It happened mid-morning. I had just stepped out of room 207 when I saw Dr. Marissa Klein walking toward me, coffee in hand, her white coat swinging behind her like always. She smiled. "Hey, Locke. Wedding prep going okay. Sienna must be run ragged planning everything." I gave a tired laugh. "You have no idea." She hesitated for half a beat, then lowered her voice. "Just make sure she gets enough rest. First trimester's no joke even if she's feeling fine." My heart skipped, then stopped. My brain stalled so hard it took a full 3 seconds for her words to land. First trimester. I blinked. She watched my face carefully. Her smile faded. She knew. She knew I didn't know. I nodded mechanical. "Yeah, totally. Thanks for the reminder." Then I walked away. My legs felt like someone else's. I made it to the on-call room, shut the door, and sat. My hands were trembling. I pressed my palms to my thighs to make them stop. Pregnant. The word echoed like a gunshot in my head. I went back over every moment from the past few weeks. The missed dinners, the late nights with vendors, the 2 perfect stories, the way she smiled when she thought I was looking. I tried to breathe, tried to give her the benefit of the doubt. Maybe she was waiting for the right moment. Maybe she didn't want to say anything until we got through the wedding. Maybe. But even then I knew. You don't hide something like that from your husband, not unless you're hiding something bigger. That night, long after she'd gone to sleep, I opened her laptop. Not her texts, not her email. Too obvious. Too risky. Instead, I went to her cloud storage. Photos, videos, albums. I clicked on one she titled Wedding Inspo. Harmless enough. I scrolled past pictures of flower arrangements, cakes, color swatches. And then I saw them photos that didn't belong. A grainy picture taken in a hotel hallway, another in a dark bar, a glass of wine lipstick stain on the rim, a man's wrist and watch at the edge of the frame. I zoomed in. My stomach dropped. It was his watch, Graham's watch. A graduation gift from my parents, custom engraved on the back. He wore it constantly. And here it was, catching light in a hotel bar next to a drink Sienna would never order if she were alone. I clicked again, and again. Then I saw it. A photo of a positive pregnancy test. On our bed. My sheets. My nightstand. My lamp in the background. The timestamp. 3 weeks ago, one of the nights she claimed she was running errands for Harper. I stared at it until my eyes burned. I closed the laptop, walked into the bathroom, vomited. When I came back, I wiped everything clean: cache history, recent files. It was instinctual. The same way I scrub in for surgery or double-check a patient's chart. Controlled, precise, silent. I sat at the edge of the bed and looked over at her. She was asleep, peaceful, like someone who had never once told a lie in her life. I thought of the toast I would have to give in a few days, the head table, the room full of our friends, our family. They'd built a stage, they'd written the script. Fine, I'd give them a show. Before I left for work the next morning, her phone buzzed on the table, going to the hotel with Graham to finalize the reception layout. Don't wait for dinner. I didn't answer. I flipped her phone face down and walked out the door. By the time I parked in the hospital lot that evening, I knew exactly what I had to do. No confrontation. No confrontation meant no deflection, no gaslighting. I needed facts, proof, something so airtight they couldn't spin it into anything else. I went back to the photo. The test was clear, so was the background. But this time I wasn't just looking at the test, I was scanning the frame for context, lighting, shadows, objects. And that's when I saw it. A bracelet on the nightstand, leather bound with a tarnished silver plate. It was Graham's. I'd seen him fidget with it at every family dinner since he was 17. It wasn't mine, and it sure as hell didn't belong in my bedroom. I began collecting timelines. Not speculation, concrete data. Reservation receipts, location histories. The family shared calendar. I traced patterns, cross-referenced them with her cloud photos and screenshots I took from her camera roll when she wasn't looking. She avoided alcohol at the engagement party, claimed she was tired, used ginger chews and sparkling water to settle her stomach, shut the bathroom door every morning and turned the sink on so I wouldn't hear her gag. I played dumb. I needed her to believe I was still asleep. So I set a trap. I asked her out to dinner, just the two of us. Her face lit up almost too quickly. Of course, she said. Then the text came hours before we were supposed to go. I'm so sorry, Harper needs me. Graham's meeting us downtown. Sure he is. I didn't reply. I just changed, got in my truck and drove toward King Street. Stopped by the pharmacy to pick up some gauze and alcohol pads just in case I needed an excuse. And I waited. They exited a hotel I knew had no event spaces. It was residential, extended stay. Graham's hand brushed the small of her back lightning fast, then gone. They weren't holding hands, but they weren't acting like family either. They crossed the street and disappeared down a side alley, laughing like it was a private joke. I didn't follow. I didn't scream. I memorized every detail: the hotel's name, the time, what they wore, who else was around. Then I went home. Her phone was charging in the kitchen. I picked it up, looked at the wallpaper. Us on our wedding day. I set it down. The next day, a message popped in the group chat. Tessa said, "Let's keep the stress low for Sienna, okay? These first few weeks are critical." My pulse spiked. She knew. Sienna had told her, not me, not her husband, but her best friend. That night, Harper called. She asked if I'd noticed Graham acting strange. "He's so checked out lately," she said. "I thought he was just stressed, but I don't know, Locke. Something feels off." I closed my eyes. She didn't know. Not yet. But if I waited too long, she'd marry a man hiding a child that wasn't hers. I looked around my house. The rooms I used to love, the bed I used to share, the floor where our future was supposed to start. It felt like a crime scene now. I sat down, picked up a pen. There would be no shouting match, no dramatic fights in public. There would be evidence, cold, precise, undeniable. And I'd start with the one place I'd avoided the longest. Sienna's phone. I knew I was running out of time. The ocean wind off Sullivan's Island was sharp that morning, sharp enough to keep the sweat off my back, despite the long sleeves and forced smiles. We were gathered for the pre-wedding shoot, the whole bridal party sun-kissed and coordinated in pastel linen, acting like nothing in the world was broken. Sienna was in her element, laughing a little too loud, brushing invisible sand off Graham's collar, smoothing his shirt in that familiar way she used to do to mine. Her voice was honeyed, her eyes calculating. Harper stood a few feet away in the shallows, looking like she wanted to cry but hadn't decided if she was allowed to. I stood behind the photographer most of the shoot, pretending I was just tired from the hospital. Everyone thought it was sweet the way I kept my distance, giving the bride her space, giving the groom his day. I smiled when prompted. I nodded when needed. Inside, I was watching them like a surgeon, tracing nerve endings, waiting to find the tear. I knew something else too. High-volume days like this, dozens of photos taken across different phones and cameras, meant one thing. Something always slipped through. A file left unfiltered, an image not fully deleted, a moment that shouldn't have been captured at all. And cloud sync. That was my silent partner. Later that night, I checked. The usual folders were filled with posed perfection, sunlight, wind-blown hair, white teeth. But buried in the depths of auto-sync in a forgotten cache, I found a small chain of outliers, blurred shots of a hotel hallway, a mirror selfie clearly not taken by Harper, and a familiar male silhouette, tall, broad-shouldered, the curve of Graham's watch glinting on his wrist. Deleted from the gallery, still intact in the cloud. They were getting sloppy. That same night was the bachelor party, or at least the co-ed version of it that Harper and Sienna had crafted to seem polished. We all gathered at a speakeasy on King Street, dimly lit and drenched in bourbon. I showed up, shook hands, stayed for 2 drinks, then ghosted. I had no appetite for celebration and less for pretending. Just before I slipped out, Noah Pike cornered me by the bar. He was already buzzed, maybe more. "You see Graham?" he asked, glancing around. Man disappeared like 40 minutes ago. We thought he stepped out to call Harper, but I saw him head toward the hotel across the street. I blinked. "Which one?" Noah shrugged. "Palmetto Grand, I think. Weird timing, right? Just dipped." Sienna was gone too for a bit now that I think about it. I figured maybe they had some vendor stuff. "Yeah," I said. "Maybe." I filed the time, place, and Noah's tone away like evidence in a sealed envelope. Graham had a pattern, and people were starting to notice. Back home, I dug deeper. One of my jackets from the back of the hall closet had a crumpled receipt in the inner pocket. I wouldn't have thought anything of it, but something made me smooth it out. Overnight parking. Palmetto Grand. The date matched one of Sienna's vendor nights. I stared at it for a full minute before folding it into my wallet. The next morning, Harper texted me and asked to meet. We picked a quiet cafe just south of Broad, tucked between 2 art galleries. She looked exhausted, less like a bride-to-be and more like someone walking the last stretch of a long punishment. She stirred her coffee like it was her only anchor. "Locke," she said quietly, "does Graham seem different to you?" I tilted my head, non-committal. "I don't know how to explain it," she said, her voice cracking. "He's distracted, distant, and he gets angry when I ask where he's been. He used to laugh things off. Now it's like I'm interrogating him. I didn't say anything. I let her speak." "There's more," she whispered. "I saw him delete messages, multiple times. He says he's clearing space, but he never used to care about that." I wanted to take her hand, tell her I knew, that I'd seen it all unraveling and was trying to stitch it back together long enough to expose it cleanly. But all I said was, "You're not crazy." She laughed, one of those bitter, scared sounds people make when they know the truth is staring at them, but they're still pretending it's not. That night, I sat in the garage holding the receipt in one hand and the memory of Harper's face in the other. I was stuck between 2 burning buildings, protecting someone who deserved the truth and protecting the illusion of a family that no longer existed. I heard footsteps. Sienna stepped into the garage, her silhouette lit by the hallway lamp. "What are you doing out here?" she asked, voice soft, too soft. I tucked the receipt under the toolbox and turned. "Just grabbing something for tomorrow's shift." She smiled, stepping closer. "You're always thinking about everyone else." I held that smile with my own, and for the first time I lied to her without blinking. Yeah, I said. That's just who I am. But in my head, I was already planning how to make sure the truth would land where it belonged. Magnolia Gardens had never looked more manicured. Twinkling lights hung from the oaks like borrowed stars. The air smelled like roses and damp earth, and everywhere I looked, someone was taking a picture. We were there for one of the last wedding events before the rehearsal dinner. Just a family brunch, Sienna had said. Except it wasn't a brunch. It was a stage. One she played perfectly. She floated from group to group like a politician, warm and glowing, laughing at all the right things. When she stopped at my side, she wrapped an arm around me and kissed my cheek, then leaned in toward my mother. Locke was so nervous on our first date, she said loud enough for the surrounding cousins and aunts to hear. He asked for a to-go box before the appetizers. Laughter, a few claps, my mother's tight smile. I laughed too, but inside I noted it. The story was small, harmless. But it painted me as naive, easily flustered. She was reshaping the narrative so that when I spoke it would sound like the overreaction of someone soft, someone fragile. She wasn't just covering her tracks anymore. She was clearing mine. That night, back at home, I waited for the opportunity I'd been circling for weeks. She left her phone on the charger and went into the shower. I didn't need the passcode. I wasn't interested in cracking anything open. I just waited. And then it came. A notification lit the lock screen. App name, layout. Not a calendar, not a gallery. One of those vault apps meant to look like something innocent, but really just a locked box. People use them for hiding anything they don't want seen. I memorized the icon, the name. I didn't tap. I didn't need to. I just knew. The next evening was the rehearsal dinner, downtown, classy, intimate. Sienna was all charm and softness. Graham downed 2 whiskeys before we'd even sat for appetizers. The tension between them was almost invisible, but only if you weren't watching. I was. Halfway through dinner, my father raised a toast and said something about grandchildren. Everyone laughed. Sienna leaned her head on my shoulder and said, "Give us a year. Locke still thinks babies come with instruction manuals." More laughter. I smiled. Inside, I was bleeding. She had turned the one thing she'd hidden into a punchline, and everyone was in on the joke but me. Later, Graham slipped out. I waited 2 minutes, then followed. From across the street, I watched him enter the Palmetto Grand. Not for the first time. Not for the last. It wasn't an accident. It was a routine. Back home, I sat on the porch. I could still smell the jasmine climbing the walls. The house looked the same, but it didn't feel like home anymore. I opened my contacts, added a new name, Brooke Sato. Attorney. I hadn't called her yet, but I would. After the last piece fell into place. My phone buzzed. Sienna. Tomorrow, don't forget to stand next to me in the family photo. I stared at the message for a long time. Then I typed, "Of course." I already knew where I'd stand and what I'd say. The chapel that morning looked like it had been plucked straight from a postcard, St. Aldar's in full sunlight, beams of gold cutting through stained glass and slicing the pews into strips of color. Everyone moved like parts of a perfect machine, stylists hustling between bridesmaids, the coordinator whispering into her mic, someone adjusting flowers by the altar for the 6th time. There was no room for error, no time for emotion, and maybe that was the point. I stayed quiet, played my part older brother of the groom, dependable calm, smiled in photos, helped Russell find his cufflinks, took a moment to help Mom fix the strap on her shoe. I was what they needed me to be. But I saw it all. Sienna, radiant in a soft lilac dress, kept one hand fluttering too close to her belly before quickly pulling it away. She sipped only water when champagne flutes were passed around. When the caterers brought out trays of crab dip, she turned away, fast nose, wrinkling face, stiff. Her heels came off the moment the ceremony ended, and when she thought no one was watching, she leaned on the wall like it was the only thing keeping her upright. Harper looked beautiful, glowing with the kind of hope I used to believe in. And Graham, he looked like a man walking a tightrope, checking his phone too often, barely keeping his breathing even. His hands trembled when he slid the ring onto Harper's finger. She didn't seem to notice, but I did. Sienna stood beside me, and during their vows, her eyes weren't on the couple. They kept drifting to Graham. The ceremony ended in applause, flashbulbs, kisses, laughter. I clapped along with everyone else, watched my brother marry the woman he didn't deserve. And then we were swept into the next act of the performance, Cooper River Yacht and Country Club. The place was stunning. White linens, gold chargers, floating candles on the terrace, a view of the water that looked like it had been filtered through a dream. Guests walked in and gasped. My mother said, "Flawless," more than once. Tessa Vale spun around in her heels and whispered, "It's like a movie." I was still playing my part. At the head table, I sat next to Sienna with Graham and Harper on the other end. The band played soft jazz and the scent of lemon and lavender drifted from the centerpieces. My glass stayed full, my mind stayed sharp, and then it came. Someone at the table, one of Harper's aunts, maybe asked, "So when are we going to hear baby news from you two?" She smiled kindly at me. "You've been married long enough to be pros by now." The table chuckled. I looked at Sienna, gave her space to answer however she wanted, and she took it. "Oh, Locke's still figuring out how to assemble IKEA furniture without panicking," she said sweetly, loud enough for the entire table to hear. "Fatherhood might be a few decades off." People laughed. I smiled. She wasn't done. "And let's be honest," she added, eyes flicking toward Graham, "some men are born decisive. Others need a little more time." I heard the tone change before the others did. The laughter came slower. Tessa looked at her glass. Harper stared straight ahead. Even my mother blinked twice, unsure of how to react. I didn't say a word. I let it hang. Let them all think I was just being gracious. I stood a few minutes later, said I needed to check on something. No one questioned it. I walked past the bar, slipped into the hallway where the bridal party had gotten ready earlier. The suite was empty now, abandoned in the chaos of celebration. Her phone was charging on the vanity. I didn't need a passcode. I didn't need to dig. I just waited. And there it was. A notification blinked on the lock screen, an album preview from the layout app. One image, a screenshot of an appointment summary with the words 8 weeks underlined. Another thumbnail, partially visible, showed the header of the Palmetto Grand confirmation email. I pulled my phone out, snapped a quick photo of the screen, and put everything back exactly as it was. My heartbeat didn't spike. My hands didn't shake. There was nothing left to question. I had what I needed. Back at the reception, the band was warming up again, and the MC stepped to the mic. And now he said a few words from the groom's brother, Locke Mercer. Applause. A few cheers. All eyes turned to me. I walked to the front of the room with my champagne glass in hand, offered a brief nod, and took the mic. "Thank you," I said simply. "I'll keep this short. Graham and I have been brothers our whole lives, but today, he becomes someone's husband, someone's partner. That's a title you have to earn every single day. And Harper, he's lucky to have you." She smiled. Graham looked down. "I've been thinking a lot about what makes a family work. It's not the rings. It's not the photos. It's the hard stuff, the trust, the honesty, the way you hold each other accountable even when it's messy." I let the words land. I looked out at the guests, then slowly walked down from the stage toward the head table. The mic stayed in my left hand. My right held the glass. I stopped just beside Sienna. I leaned down. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. I saw the appointment summary. I whispered. 8 weeks. The Palmetto Grand. You really thought you could hide it forever. Her body went stiff. Her smile froze. I pulled back and looked into her eyes. "What's the plan, Sienna?" I asked. "You gonna tell them it's mine?" Then I straightened, turned back to the room, and resumed. "Family is built on truth," I said loud and clear. "And sometimes that truth is uncomfortable. But numbers don't lie. 8 weeks ago we weren't trying. We weren't even talking." I saw heads turning. Tessa dropped her fork. My mother leaned forward, breath caught. The entire room tilted toward me, toward the quiet eruption they hadn't seen coming. "There's a hotel downtown. I continued where a lot of vendor meetings took place. Funny thing, vendors don't usually meet you after midnight. Someone gasped. Graham stood halfway, then stopped. His face was ash. Harper gripped the table, knuckles white. There's been a lot of pretending, I said. A lot of rehearsed smiles. But truth doesn't need rehearsal. Harper's voice cracked the silence. Graham, she said, is he talking about you? He didn't answer. Russell stood up, his face tight. What's going on? Diane reached for me. Locke, maybe we should? Sienna finally spoke, voice shrill. What are you doing? Just telling the truth, I said. The room broke open. Chairs scraped the floor. Someone knocked over a glass. Guests stood. Murmurs swelled. The music died. The wedding cake sat untouched. Bouquets wilted in forgotten centerpieces. And I walked away. My phone buzzed before I reached the exit. A number I didn't recognize. The message, this is Harper. Please don't disappear. I need the full story. Now. The house was dark when I got home. Still in my suit, jacket off, tie loosened. I didn't turn on the lights. I just stood in the silence and let it settle over me like a blanket pulled over a corpse. Then I got to work. I laid everything out, photos, timestamps, the screenshot from her phone receipts, calendar entries. I built a timeline down to the minute. 8 weeks. Hotel confirmations. Vendor meetings that didn't exist. Phone records from Graham's sudden disappearances. I wasn't guessing anymore. I was documenting. The next morning I called Brooke Sato. Infidelity, I said flatly. With my brother. I have proof. I want a file. She didn't flinch. We'll do it clean. We mapped everything: asset protection, bank access, joint accounts, frozen emergency injunctions. And then she dropped the hammer. If she used marital funds to hide it, hotels, rides, anything we can press for financial misconduct. That gives us leverage. It wasn't personal anymore. It was structural. That afternoon I met Harper at a cafe. She looked hollowed out, like she'd lived 10 years in 24 hours. I handed her a folder. This is what I have. She looked through it slowly. He told me he was sleeping at Miles's place when he didn't come home. Said he needed space. We matched dates. Her lies, mine. Together they made a whole. Back home, Diane called in tears. We need to sit down. As a family. Russell called too. You're blowing this up. You're punishing everyone. I told them both the same thing. This isn't about saving face. It's about ending a lie. I'm done. I can't tell you that everything healed overnight. Because it didn't. Some nights I still remember the way a room can go silent, how your own heartbeat suddenly sounds too loud, how perfect can feel like a costume you can't breathe in. But time has a strange kindness. It doesn't erase what happened, it just gives us enough distance to see what the truth protected us from and what we're still allowed to rebuild. And maybe that's the part we forget. When we're in the middle of it, we don't have to become cruel to survive. We just have to become honest. Sometimes the most human thing we can do is stop pretending and choose ourselves without turning the world into an enemy. If you've been listening and something in this story felt a little too familiar, you're not alone. If you want to be part of a quiet corner of the internet where we don't judge, we just listen and share, subscribe and stay with us. And if you feel like it, leave a few words in the comments. Even just I'm here or where you're watching from. I read more than you think, and sometimes a small connection makes a heavy story feel lighter. Good night, take care of yourself, and I'll see you in the next one.